If we've never met, I'm Angela. I'm the Christian Sexpert, and I am the host of Go Have Good Sex with the Christian Sexpert. A lot of you are probably here because you already follow me on my social media accounts, and welcome to this new platform. I've been praying about it for a while, and God has made it clear that it is time for me to start my own podcast journey. I've been a guest on a lot of different podcasts, but it's time to get my own voice out there on my own platform. If you don't know me and this is your first time meeting me, I am so glad that you're here. I talk all about sex and intimacy in Christian marriage. And for this first episode, I just wanted to do a little bit about me, about what I do, the things that I offer, what I believe, because I have already scheduled some amazing guests for us for the first season of the podcast. And so I wanted to establish my perspective before we bring other guests in. So I have been married for over 20 years. This year is 22. It's really funny when you sort of approach the 20-year mark, you kind of start forgetting exactly how long, and you have to do a little math in your head. But it has been 22 years that we have been married. My husband will occasionally show up in my social media posts, but you don't see a lot of him. And that is because of the nature of my work. I only work really when our son is out of the house because he doesn't need exposed to all of this yet. I do homeschool him, so he's here a lot. But my husband is gracious enough to make sure that he gets out of the house on a regular basis so that I can record my podcasts and my social media and all of those things for you guys. So that's why you don't see my husband very often in my work, but also like this is my job. And it would be weird if I was showing up to his workplace all of the time too. I understand that it is a little different because my work is focused on marriage. And so you would expect to see him some, and you do. He also isn't a huge fan of being in front of the camera. He does it to make me happy sometimes. So maybe one of these days we'll do a podcast, the two of us together. I am often asked how I became a Christian sex and intimacy coach because a lot of people think that that is sort of an oxymoron. And the journey, as many do, started a million years ago. Because a million years ago, good girls from small towns didn't go to school to become sex coaches. They went to school to get their MRS degree. And if you didn't graduate from a small Christian college, you might not know what that means, but it means that I graduated college with my degree in religion and psychology, and a few short weeks later graduated to the MRS degree, which means I got married literally just a few weeks after graduation. We spent the entirety of my senior year with me commuting home most weekends to try and plan a wedding and graduate. To my mother's great delight, I, in fact, did do a 5-year plan at college at a private Christian school. So she and her pocketbook loved me for that. In fact, when my husband went to ask her for permission to marry me, she said, if you get her to graduate. I think she was a little afraid I wasn't going to. But I remained fascinated with human sexuality and read and studied everything I could get my hands on. And so after I had my son, we had our son after being married for 13, 14 years maybe. I joined an international online women's ministry called Natural Christian Mamas. And I was eventually asked to join the leadership team for the ministry because of one, the wisdom that I brought to the discussions on sex and marriage, and two, the wisdom I brought for gentle parenting. And one night we were, the leadership team, we're all sitting around chatting because we, have the group chat and we do life together and we pray for each other and we encourage each other. These women are my sisters. I'm an only child. They are the closest thing that I will ever have to siblings. My best friend is from this group. We are literally in each other's wills as the guardians of our children, that close. Okay. So we were all chatting one night and talking about something had come up in the ministry about sex and marriage, and I was like, I want to do this. All of us homeschooled at the time, and I said, when my son doesn't need me so much anymore, I want to help women break free from purity culture. I see the damage that purity culture has done to marriages. I see the damage that the messaging around sex, the obligation sex messaging that is being preached in every Christian marriage book, preached from the pulpit. I see how those messages have damaged women's relationships with their husbands, their relationships with themselves, their relationships with their sexual selves. And I want to help heal that. I want to help people turn back to biblical sexuality. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. I mentioned it to my husband and I said, I have this dream, when I'm not homeschooling anymore, maybe. And Guy kind of laughed and just literally a couple of months later said, that is not a later dream. This is a now thing. This is now. You need to move now. Something else happened in the ministry, and one of the other leaders said, Angela, that should be your TikTok handle, is the Christian Sexpert. And I was like, of course it should. But I ran over to TikTok. I reserved the handle. I was like, maybe I'll do something with this one day. And having raging ADHD, like one does, on a whim, said, I'm going to start a TikTok. And I started recording videos on sex and intimacy in Christian marriage, knowing that the ADHD would, the novelty would wear off. I would drop it in a couple of weeks and then maybe pick it up again when I got serious and decided to start a career. Well, God once again laughed and said, I am calling you to my people now. My people need this message that I have put in your heart. And so I started my TikTok in late January, and by Easter of that year, I had gone viral with a video at over 5 million views. And from the moment I posted that first TikTok, which by the way, I look back on and cringe at how bad it is, I have been holding on to the hem of Jesus's garment as he runs in front of me saying, okay, Jesus, but can we slow down a little? This is so fast. It's all happening so fast. Because less than a year later, I was contacted by Sarah Jakes Roberts' team and said, hey, Pastor Sarah wants you on her podcast. And I was like, sure she does. I thought I was being punked. And then I realized I wasn't, and they were serious. And I was like, Pastor, if you don't know, Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts is a powerhouse. She is a pastor. She pastors with her husband, Pastor Teray Roberts. They're out of Houston. Her dad is T.D. Jakes. And so just massive, huge platform, right? I thought I was being punked. And this whole time I'm going, there is no way that I could have put my content on her feed for her to see that. So this whole thing has been a God thing because people are desperate for messaging, healthy messaging about sex in Christian marriage. And that is how I wound up here. I have been studying, as I said, human sexuality and the intersection of faith and human sexuality for over 20 years. And I am so excited every day that I get to wake up and do this. I get messages almost daily from women who say, either your messages have helped us have a better sex life. I didn't know how to orgasm before we found your content. Or, I used to have obligation sex and now we stopped and our sex life is so much better. Or I get messages from women who say, my husband is coercing me. My husband is using pornography and says that if I don't give him sex, he will turn back to pornography, or my husband mistreats the kids if I don't give him sex. And so I have to have sex with him regularly so he is kind to our children. Those messages break my heart. But knowing that I have cultivated a place where these people can reach out both for the positive and support with the negative in their marriages is so humbling, that you all trust me with some of the most intimate moments of your lives. So thank you for that. And I hope to, with this podcast, reach even more people with a message of healthy sex and what sex can be and what good sex can look like in Christian marriage. A little bit about what I believe. So I believe that God gave us an incredible gift when he designed sex and gave it to us in the gift of marriage. And I really believe in good sex. That is the name of the podcast and my tagline, after all, go have good sex. But I think that the modern evangelical church has done a lot of damage when it comes to this amazing gift. And part of the reason that I started doing what I do is because I want to change the narrative on what sex is in marriage and what biblically it's designed to be, and how that differs from the modern American teachings that are shoved down our throats. It starts when we're children with purity culture, and purity culture is toxic. And if you are mad right now, you probably don't have a firm understanding of what purity culture really is, because purity culture is not the same thing as biblical purity. And that's like a 10-episode arc all on its own. So I think that purity culture is a problem, and we need to stop defaulting to that. Purity culture relies heavily on shame and control in order to try and control behavior. I actually heard an amazing illustration from a sermon unrelated to purity culture, but it said that humans build fences around the law. So think of the law like a cliff, that if you fall over the cliff, you'll die. So in order to protect themselves, humans built a fence around the cliff to stop anybody from even approaching the cliff. And we know that doesn't actually work, right? So the story is old as time. God told Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Satan said, is that what he really said? And Eve said, well, we're not even supposed to touch it. And her saying that they shouldn't touch it was she and Adam putting a fence around the law. Also, I have raging ADHD and perimenopause brain fog symptoms. So sometimes I dive down rabbit holes a million feet deep. And so you guys have to stick with me to get back to the point. This, if you are watching the videos, this little thing is Honeybee. If you've seen my social media or you are in my private Patreon community, you know that she's a problem. She is a menace. She is a tiny ball of rage wrapped in fur. She's a dog. She's a little 6-pound dog, and she's a little white fluff ball. But she thinks that we're connected. If she could crawl inside my skin, she would. So she does show up in a lot of my content. So other things that I believe. So the problems with the modern evangelical sex messaging starts with purity culture. And then once you get married, the message is you are supposed to turn into the sex goddess who is available for your husband's every whim and desire. And almost all of the teaching that we have had up until the last few years around sex in evangelical Christianity in the modern American church is men need sex, women just need to give him more sex, and he'll be happy. If you submit harder, he'll turn into a good man. And that it silences women's sexuality, because we are just as sexual as men. We are just not socially conditioned to be allowed to express our sexuality in the same way. There is no biblical or scriptural evidence that God created men to be more sexual or enjoy sex more. It is modern evangelical messaging and pornography culture that have socialized and conditioned us to believe that men are more sexual. And you can look at all of the factors that go into that, things like responsive desire is not normalized. Spontaneous desire is what is normalized. And men stereotypically experience spontaneous desire, and men orgasm in 5.4 minutes. And it takes women 18 to 20 minutes of 14 to 20 minutes of direct clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. And you can't achieve that stimulation with the standard missionary position that most couples default to. And so she does have a harder time orgasming than he does. So of course, she's not going to enjoy it as much because it's harder for her to orgasm. And all of these things contribute to damaging a woman's sexuality. And so I am really passionate about redeeming God's message for biblical sexuality between a husband and wife. And that's really complex. So a lot of things go into that. So I will talk about things like date nights, and I will talk about the mental load, and I will talk about domestic labor, and I will talk about how women need direct clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. And I want to assure you that, on my public socials, I can't say words like clitoris and anus and orgasm and sex frequently because it puts my accounts at risk of community standards violations. But here on this podcast, we're going to use all of the correct names. We're going to use all of the anatomical terms. And because we have to be able to speak plainly about these things so that we have an understanding of what sexuality is so that we can fully embrace it and enjoy it. So I believe that God designed sex to be mutually pleasurable, which means I see no model for sacrificial or obligation sex in the Bible, which brings us to that do not deprive verse that gets really heated in my comment sections of my social media when I talk about that. And again, that's, a whole other episode all on its own. But God designed you to enjoy sex. Both you and your husband, or both you and your wife, if you are the husband who is listening to this. My followers are primarily women, but I do have a solid male following and supporters. And if you're one of those men who follow my work and support me, I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you for seeking to be one of the healthy ones. So other things that I believe about sexuality, I believe that God tells us that whatever we want to do between a husband and a wife is the marriage bed is undefiled, and we have this opportunity to explore and play and enjoy each other in the bedroom. And so a lot of Christians, again, like to put fences around the law, and they want to put stipulations on what a husband and wife can enjoy together in the bedroom. And I think barring a few very specific circumstances, God doesn't put those restrictions on what we do with our husband or wife in the bedroom, because I don't see evidence of that in the Bible. A little bit more about me personally. I mentioned I've been married over 20 years. I homeschool. I do live with chronic disabilities. I mentioned that I have ADHD. I also have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means my joints don't like to stay in their assigned seats. That comes with a lot of other comorbidities depending on the person who is living with the syndrome. And so for me personally, it involves a lot of fatigue, a lot of, oh, my ankle rolled again. If you are watching the video, I have the rings on my hands to keep my finger joints in their assigned seats. But that also means that I get to talk about the intersection of sex, Christianity, and disability. I think the modern evangelical church has done a huge disservice to a massive population by not being more proactive in how it deals with disability. And there is certainly no one else talking about sex, disability, and faith. And so that gives me a really unique opportunity and perspective to be able to have the conversations about how disabilities impact marriage and sex, especially in the long term. There's a lot of people that say, if you aren't having sex, then, why be married? You're just, marriages need sex to survive. And as someone facing down the barrel of a lifelong disability, I can promise you that marriages can survive without sex. Is sex amazing and wonderful? And do I have a whole platform devoted to it? Yes. But your marriage can survive if you have a disability that takes it off the table for a season or potentially forever, which is why one of the pillars of my work is talking about the different types of intimacy. There are 13 different types of intimacy that we can experience in marriage. Sex is only one of them. And if you frame sex as the celebration of intimacy you've established before you ever reach the bedroom, then you need the other 12 intimacies so that you have something to celebrate by the time you get to the bedroom. So we will talk a lot about the different intimacies and how they impact your sex life and how you need all of the intimacies so that you can have a healthy sex life. And that is one of the pillars of my work. And speaking of my work, the things that I offer, I am on all of the major social media platforms: TikTok, Insta, Facebook, and YouTube. I also have a private Patreon community where I teach all the spicy things I can't teach on my public socials. So if you want to learn exactly how to give a blowjob, or you want to learn how to experience multiple orgasms, or you want to learn about kinks, if you want to learn how to reconnect to your body, you can learn all of that in my Patreon. My Patreon is very affordable. My patrons get exclusive discounts to a lot of the other things that I offer. So make sure that you join over there so that you can learn how to have good sex. As a disclaimer, everything that I do will always be 100% biblically aligned and 100% nudity free. So you will never find something that would go against your faith. It may go against your personal convictions, but it won't go against the Bible. And you'll never find any nudity in any of my content. I also offer private coaching. I have a lot of couples that come to me because they are experiencing libido differences. And so they come to me for customized plans on how to sort that out between the two of them. I have products available on my website that I have written to help the sexual and non-sexual intimacies in your marriage. I have 31 Days of Intimacy, which is all about walking through the different types of intimacy in very practical and accessible ways. I have my Marriage Playdate, which is a date night experience designed to help you go deeper in your sexual intimacy. It's a list of over 500 activities. And the way that it works is you print 2 copies, one for you, one for your spouse. You go through, you give everything a rating on a scale from, I'm not really interested in that, to I think this is delightful. We should do it all the time. Let's go do it right now. And the beauty of the Marriage Playdate is you will never wind up on some terrifying corner of Google trying to figure out if you're actually interested in an activity or not, because all the definitions are right there for you. After you've given everything a rating, you come back together, you compare notes, you see where you line up. Now you've got a whole new list of activities to enjoy. I also recently published a sex journal. It's a journal with over 500 prompts. And the way that it works is one of you chooses a prompt, you write down your answer, and then you give it to your spouse. You don't stare into their soul and make it weird while they read it, but you let them read it in privacy. You give them time to read your response, consider how they want to respond, write their own answer, and you pass it back and forth, reading and writing answers. And it allows you to get curious, right? We know that women raised in purity culture have less of a sexual education than those who were not raised in purity culture. In fact, in her book, She Deserves Better by Sheila Wray Gregoire, she tells us that they did a study, a legitimate scientific study, and we know that women raised in purity culture have less language. They have less of the actual vocabulary for discussing sexual things than those who are not raised in purity culture. And so a lot of modern evangelical Christian women want to talk to their spouse about sex, but they literally lack the vocabulary to be able to do so, which is why my sex journal is so important, because it helps open up those conversations when you literally don't even know how to broach the subject. You can also check out the links in the show notes for other partnerships that I have. I am partnered with a Christian sex toy website where you can shop for spicy toys and accessories, vibrators, things like that, lingerie, all in a completely nudity-free environment. The store is Romantic Blessings. You can use code Sexpert10 for 10% off your purchase. And so there's some other partnerships that I have that are linked in my show notes. Some other random fun facts. My professional speaker bio says, I am a challenger of the status quo and a questioner of things that have always been. And if that just isn't me to a T, I don't know what is. I am fluent in sarcasm. It is my primary language. It's also my primary love language. If I am not sarcastic and tease you a little bit, I probably don't like you personally. I love all things glitter as long as it is not loose glitter in my house with my son. In fact, I would say that my favorite color is glitter. I am obviously a dog lover. We have Little Miss Honeybee, who makes a frequent appearance, but we also have a larger dog. He's actually my son's dog. We've had many dogs before this. Not a cat person at all. If you are a cat person, I'm sorry. My husband and I love theater, both going to and doing theater. Before we had our son, we were very involved in our local community theater. In fact, I was on the board of directors, and we spent a lot of time in that theater. Some of my favorite shows I got to star in, and my husband was the lighting director who, made me look good on stage. I miss so much being on stage, and I am hoping once our son is a little bit older, I will be able to get back to doing it someday. Oh, which reminds me, professionally, things that I offer, I also do public speaking. So if you are looking for a speaker for your next women's event or a marriage conference, or you even want to have me speak to your MOPS group, I think they're MomCo now, or your small Bible study group, hit me up. We can work something out depending on the size of the group. I love getting to speak to groups because this messaging is important. The last big event that I did was Women Evolve with Sarah Jakes Roberts, and I got to be on stage in a baseball stadium full of 40,000 women and had them screaming clitoris and orgasm. That might be like, I might have peaked. That might have been the moment in my life when I peaked, is getting 40,000 women, Christian women who have probably never even said the word orgasm in their life, to scream orgasm in a baseball stadium. Okay. If you guys have questions, please message me, email me, put it in the comments. If you're on a platform that allows commenting, I want to know what you guys want to hear about on the podcast. I want to know what you think we should be talking about. If you have someone that would make a great guest for the podcast that you want me to talk to, tag them, message me, let me know who you guys want to see on this podcast, hear on this podcast. And you guys know that you need to go have good sex.